Dismembers, it's Mindy. So this one starts the way a lot of the hardest cases do, not with a suspect, not with a crime scene, not even with a missing person report. It starts with someone just being found, and not in a good way. We're talking remote forest road, middle of nowhere, Oregon, the kind of setting that's starting to sound way too familiar in the Pacific Northwest.
We talk about this a lot.
Doesn't it feel like it?
Yeah.
Hunters out doing their thing, and then suddenly they realize they're maybe not alone. And what they're looking at isn't what they expected. It's human remains.
Yeah. Hey there, Dismembers. This is Dr. Nici from Meet Me at the Morgue. Mindy's taking us into this scene now. And yeah, it's not just a set of remains. This was one of those scenes that tells you immediately that time has passed, probably a lot of time. April 3rd, 2020, Linn County, Oregon. Hunters are out scouting for spring bear season in the Willamette National Forest. They're driving along a U.S. Forest Service road near Cascadia, which is not somewhere you just accidentally end up. You have to be going there on purpose. Cascadia is a small unincorporated community along the Santiam River, about 14 miles east of Sweet Home, Oregon. And these hunters, they see something off the side of the road. At first, it doesn't fully register, but then it does. They're bones, human bones, and not in one place. They're scattered throughout the wooded landscape, strewn along the forest floor on both sides of that Forest Service road. The hunters immediately call it in. Sheriff's deputies from Linn County respond. And when law enforcement gets there, they find exactly what was described by those hunters: a pelvis and two femurs on the side of the road, a skull and a mandible on the other, additional bones, clothing spread out over about several yards. Everything's exposed. Everything's out in the open. This fact makes a difference because deputies immediately saw that this didn't look like a burial or like a clandestine gravesite.
Yeah, you look at something like that and you know right away, this has most likely been out there for a while. Yeah. And then your mind immediately goes to, what in the hell happened here? And who could this possibly be?
Question of the hour.
Right? Question of the hour. Law enforcement probably started going through their short list of missing persons in their area as they kind of assessed the scene. Because as we said before, these cases are hard as hell to get moving when you don't even know the name of the dead person.
Exactly. Detectives quickly did determine that the way the bones were scattered on both sides of the road was entirely consistent with animal scavenging. There were no signs of a burial. There was no attempt to conceal the remains. No depressions in the earth with bones protruding from them. No piles of dirt left over. No staging of branches or twigs to conceal that body. Just time, the environment, and wildlife doing, what wildlife does. And honestly, we see this type of skeletal recovery in Oregon more often than people probably realize, Mindy, because when scavengers of all shapes and sizes, like coyotes, bears, birds, rodents, yes, even the little guys, they get in on the party too. Whenever they come upon something dead, like a deer or a squirrel or a raccoon, or in this case, a human being, they take advantage of the opportunity to, scavenge. There's no sugarcoating this one. The bones are scattered in this case because the soft tissue is being actively consumed.
Yum, yum.
I know.
Dinner
horrible
time
to think.
Yep.
Yep, but it happens. This is biology, right? This is life, circle of life. So right away, the haphazard nature of the body placement tells you something really important right off the bat. This person wasn't carefully hidden by, say, a suspect. They were left, or they collapsed, or they were dumped. At this point, there's no way to tell. And again, I think the location matters also. We're about 4 miles off State Highway 20, deep into Forest Service roads. As deputies continue to identify human bones to collect, they're also working and looking for other evidence. And they're actually not finding anything at that point. No abandoned vehicles, so no license plates or VIN numbers to run, no encampments around, no signs that someone had been living out there in a transient capacity, and critically, no personal effects that may lead to an identification. No ID, no phone, no handbag, no wallet, no jewelry. There are some interesting things that were collected that day, though. Several articles of clothing, a mass of hair, which sounds gross, but can be weirdly helpful in determining how this person may have looked. Nothing was found that day that immediately tells you who this person is, however. So, from the very beginning, this case starts at a disadvantage.
Yeah, no quick answers here on this one. No wallet, no license, no suicide note tacked to a tree. I know that sounds horrible, but that's, sometimes what comes with a body found.
Yeah.
There's nothing that immediately connects this person to a name or a life. And that's where it gets hard, because now you're not just trying to figure out what happened, you're trying to figure out what happened and who this even happened to. You're working from scratch. And as you notice, members, this is not exactly uncommon here in Oregon. They don't call it the, wild and scenic for nothing. And out here, it's not unusual for sheriff's deputies, death investigators, medical examiner staff, and forensic folks like Nici to all be working toward the exact same goal. Give the dead person back their name. Because until you know who they are, law enforcement can't fully start figuring out what happened, how they got there, or who may have put them there. And once the name finally comes back, the medical examiner has one of the hardest jobs of all, finding the family, making that call, sharing the worst news of their lives, and starting to piece together who this person was, before they just became a case file.
Right. And the sheriff's deputies, along with the county death investigator, did a really solid job that day, carefully recovering both the skeletal remains and every piece of clothing and potential evidence that they could find. Because out in a scene like that, you don't get a second chance. Everything in this case gets transported to the Oregon State Medical Examiner's office. And that's where the next phase begins. The first step is to examine the remains and try to exclude certain groups of people, male or female, young or old, approximate ancestry, stature even, hair color, anything we can use to start narrowing the field so law enforcement can take that information and search missing persons databases. On April 7th, 2020, we begin that postmortem examination. I'm with the lead detective that morning, and I'll be honest, this was not a quick or clean process. This was a multi-hour, very real, very messy situation because the body was not fully skeletonized, which actually makes things more complicated. So we're dealing with, that day, liquefied tissue, degraded organs, residual brain material, connective tissue holding the bones together. All of that has to be removed carefully just to get a clear look at the skeleton underneath.
This is the part people don't see on TV.
True.
Right? Or honestly,
smell.
Or smell. Or maybe honestly don't want to see. Because we've all been trained by TV to think this is quick and clinical. You walk in, take a look, run a test, and boom, answers. That's not reality. This is slow. It's physical. It's uncomfortable. And yes, it fucking stinks. It is smelly. And it takes a lot of time and care just to get to a point where you can even just start looking and asking the questions.
Yeah, exactly. This is the part that smells. This is the part that takes time, where your clothes are going straight into the morgue washing machine and you've changed gloves over and over so as not to get sloppiness on your camera, the computer keyboard, or the cupboards. And this is where we start looking for anything that can help us understand who this person is. And in this case, the clothing was incredibly important. The investigating detective was actually, again, present for the exam, which I always appreciate. It's kind of fun to stand there with someone and revel in your pain. He was really interested, though, in seeing how a postmortem exam actually works, how we process a case like this from start to finish. However, I think he showed up expecting something a little more, I don't know, polished, maybe a quick exam, maybe something like a regular autopsy when one of our pathologists has a start time, physical features are well defined, wounds are easily visualized, pictures are straightforward, and at the end of an hour, or maybe even 3, some dramatic conclusions, maybe a few aha moments. Instead, this detective, he got 6 hours of decomposition, clothing removal, cleaning of clothing, photography of bones, then bone cleaning, and me saying, nope, we're not there yet. By about hour 3, I think he realized this job is a lot less TV and a whole lot more patience and steak.
Oh yeah, I'm sure a whole lot of reality slapped him in the face that day. Yet not exactly CSI. 42 minutes, a bunch of commercials, and bam, solved, or at least on the way to being solved.
Yeah, not even close. I have stood in that room with other detectives and investigators in the past, and they stand there and they literally are looking at me like, when is this going to be done? And there's no, you can't put a time limit on it, especially for skeletal remains, because you never know what you're going to find. And especially with a decomp case that just takes time. So it's not even close to CSI. But that's the reality of this work, both in the forensic arena and the death investigation realm. So as we removed and cleaned each piece of clothing, trying to find the tags, the sizes, anything useful, I started building kind of a picture in my head. The clothing looked like this. There was a purple Apana brand athletic jacket, size extra small. There was a green BKE brand camisole with spaghetti straps, size small extra long. A pair of Wrangler jeans with crystal embellishments along the back pockets, size 5'6". A Victoria's Secret VSX sports bra, size 32C, and black Steve Madden ankle boots, size 9.5. Nearby at the scene where most of the body was located, deputies found striped socks and a black heavy canvas bandana tied in a square knot as if it had been worn like around the neck. So just because this is women's clothing dismembers, I've obviously got to look at the skeleton to determine that this is, in fact, a biological female. So we're not just going to go on the clothes. Bones can tell the story of this person's sex. It can estimate how old she might be when she died. It can even predict how tall she may have been. In addition, I look for any kinds of wounds on the bone that may give me a clue as to why she ended up in the woods. This case was interesting and frustrating all at the same time because her skeletal system is in that exact sweet spot of age where we don't see signs of development like in a teenager or a young adult, and we don't see degenerative changes on the bone like in an older adult. I'll get into what we determined in a minute, but let's go back to the clothes. Because as I'm documenting all of this on that day, I'm not just listing clothing. I'm thinking about her size, her build, her style even. You start to get a sense of this person before you ever even have a name.
That part always gets me a little bit, right? Because suddenly she's not just remains anymore. She's someone who picked out those jeans, someone who chose that jacket, right? Someone who had a favorite outfit.
Yeah.
Someone who had style and a routine. maybe even a favorite bandana. And you start thinking she got dressed that day for a reason. She thought she was going somewhere. And it makes you realize this was just maybe a normal day for her, really, right up until it wasn't.
It is eerie and sad, I think, when you put it that way, Mindy. But those are the kinds of observations you just make that makes our job so important. She was a person. So we really need to figure out who she is at this point. So dismembers from the skeletal analysis, uh, we start building what we call a biological profile. Again, we know that the clothing is typically that we're seeing female, but what can we determine from the skeleton? Well, this is what we determined. She was a Caucasian female. She was between the ages of 30 and 50 years old. Again, that's that sweet spot when the skeletal system doesn't really show a lot of changes. We call it static, if you will. So we know that she's developed fully as an adult, but not necessarily so aged that her bones are becoming decrepit or deteriorating to a point. She's also approximately 5'3" to 5'9" in height. And yeah, that's a pretty wide range, but that's the reality of age and stature estimation. It is an estimation. We're working off of bone measurements, population data, statistical ranges, morphological characteristics, or otherwise known as physical features of the bone that either show wear and tear or they don't. It's an estimate. It's not a driver's license, if only, right? We also noted she had short, wavy hair, which was dark blonde to brown. We measured it to give us a better understanding of what it might have looked like, how long it was, because it was super matted and wet when it was collected out in the woods. And hair is wild, by the way. Soft tissue can liquefy and decompose. Organs can disappear, but hair can hang around like it owns the place. It's crazy. Keratin is stubborn as hell. I'm hoping you're getting a really good mental image by now of how this day went, because there's hair and clothes and goop and person and yeah.
And smell.
So, and
I think
smell,
we've got
exactly.
I
I know.
think people are picturing this now.
I hope you have vivid imaginations out there, dismembers. So piece by piece, we're starting to understand who she might have been. Then we look at the possible time that went by. How long was she out there? She was found in April, remember, but based on the level of decomposition, the location of where the remains were found, the climate that happens in that location, I estimated she had likely been out there for at least a couple of months, if not a bit longer, which puts her death somewhere between, say, November of 2019 and February of 2020. So now we've got a possible window of when she met her demise. And that's when the investigative side really kicks in, because at this point, everything we do is about trying to give her back her name at first. That's our first step. We cleaned the skull and the mandible so we could bring in a forensic odontologist.
Translation for non-forensic nerds, the teeth doctor, or you could call her the forensic dentist, because an odontologist is an actual dentist. And what blows my mind is she's collecting the exact same kind of information from every single tooth that your dentist collects when your ass is sitting in that chair pretending you floss and lying to your dentist that you floss twice a day.
They can tell.
They know you're lying. Trust me. She's charting every tooth, every filling, every crown, every missing tooth, every weird little dental quirk that makes your mouth uniquely yours. It's not too different than a fingerprint, really. Mm-hmm. And then she's taking x-rays of the skull and the mandible, which, again, for the non-bone nerds, that's your lower jaw, in the exact same angles and orientations that she uses on a living patient. All of that is so that the investigators can take those records and, again, compare them to missing person dental records. And hopefully they can stop calling this woman, these bones, Jane Doe, and start calling her by her real damn name.
Exactly. And you're right, Mindy, teeth are incredible identifiers. Our doc examined every single tooth, took dental x-rays, created a full dental chart. We call that dental coding that gets uploaded into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NamUs. And NamUs is really important here. It's a nationwide system that connects missing persons with unidentified remains. You've heard us talk about it plenty of times before, dismembers. This system is incredibly valuable as law enforcement, medical examiners, and even families can log into NamUs and search for their loved ones on the unidentified remains portion of the website. And death investigators and anthropologists, among others, can search for the identity of their decedent on the missing persons portion of the website. Because remember, this woman might not be from Oregon. She could be from really anywhere. So after the exam was completed in the afternoon, I still have to add notations to images, download statistical analyses, finalize that biological profile, keep the pathologist assigned to the case informed as to what I've found and how we are moving forward with this case. And I need to write a legible report that law enforcement can understand and can hold up in a court of law. So in the couple of days leading past that examination, the detective and I talk. There's no missing female in the area that matches her physical characteristics. Her dental information is in the system, but hasn't pinpointed a possible missing person for comparison. And the investigating agency has entered the data and biometrics of the case into NCIC with no clear resolution. So we create her profile in the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. She becomes unidentified person number 67939. And that's a hard moment because that number, that's almost all she is in the system until we find her name.
And that's the part that kind of stops you for a second, right? Like all of these, right? There's no name because now we know a lot about her now, right? There's a lot of information we have, but we still don't know who she is. No name, no missing person report tied to her. No one actively saying that's my person. And that's a weird place to sit. It just feels icky because you've got a face staring or starting to form in your mind, right? It's just you're picturing what she could have looked like, and a body type and a time frame, but no identity to anchor it to.
Yes, that's all true. And it's very frustrating. It can feel like you're stuck at that point. And remember, there's no such thing as DNA analysis on skeletal remains in Oregon in 2020. That resource is gone. If she does happen to have a DNA profile that was collected during her lifetime and it had been uploaded into CODIS, we will never know because we won't be able to extract a DNA profile from the remains due to the lack of resources through our agency. And without identification, everything else stalls. The NamUs profile on this case went live in late April of 2020. And that's when we bring in our amazing forensic artist from Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, Callie Bellman, to create a two-dimensional reconstruction based on her skull. Callie does the science on the skull. I give her the description of the clothing and the hair we found. And a science meets artist rendition is created. And now she's not just a description, Mindy. Now we have a face.
Again, so like this is so cool. The science exists, the technology exists, the experts exist. And with everything Nici just walked you through, we've moved one step closer, hopefully, to finding her real damn name. Maybe somebody recognizes her. Maybe somebody recognizes the clothes. Maybe somebody sees Callie Bellman's reconstruction and suddenly says, holy shit, I know her. And by the way, dismembers, like always, we've uploaded photos of every clothing item recovered with the remains, along with Callie's incredible two-dimensional facial reconstruction over at our website, meetmeatthemorgue.org. Go check it out. It's kind of cool.
Really interesting. I mean, it's fascinating, and her drawing is incredible. So check it out, dismembers.
And again, it just puts that factual, like this is real life. This really happened. This was a real case. This is real evidence.
Yeah. We're not just pulling
we're not
shit out of our butts.
No, we're not
This
just making
happened.
shit up. This actually happened. And because you never know, right? Who might recognize something.
Right.
But there's, again, here's the frustrating part. Even with all that science, all that expertise, all those databases, all those images, the systems that are supposed to help still aren't always helping. And by now, dismembers, you've listened to enough of these cases and heard enough about forensic science to know exactly where somebody like Nici, working as a forensic anthropologist here in Oregon, can hit a wall. Because there are a lot of ways to identify a dead person, right? Fingerprints, facial recognition, dental comparisons, tattoos, medical implants, surgical hardware, witness reports, medical records. Hell, sometimes it's something as simple as a scar or an old broken bone. Bodies get identified this way every single day. In fact, the vast majority of people who come through a medical examiner's office are identified and released back to their families within like the first week of us, as Nici likes to say, hosting them.
Welcome.
Yes. But then none of that works when there's no fingerprints, no dental records, no medical history, no family, no obvious missing person report. That's when things get real complicated. And that is exactly where this case gets interesting.
But when someone is unrecognizable, you can't see tattoos. The fleshy bits of the fingers are all gone, so there's no fingerprints, and you can't find anyone in the area that's been reported missing that matches your deceased person's biometrics. What's a girl to do? And as I mentioned, our state crime lab wouldn't help. They had already put a restriction on the cases they accepted for analysis, and back then in 2020, they were not accepting skeletal remains cases, and they weren't uploading unidentified persons' DNA profiles into CODIS. They also weren't uploading any missing persons profiles in CODIS. So any kind of DNA testing either had to be postponed, or the medical examiner's office themselves had to find a way and find the funding to pay a private lab to perform DNA analysis and upload the DNA profile into CODIS.
And look, this case mattered, just like every unidentified person who comes through that morgue mattered. Nobody wants this woman sitting on a shelf as Jane Doe one day longer than she had to. So when the usual systems aren't getting us where we needed to go, we pivot. Linn County investigators and the medical examiner's office basically looked at each other and said, all right, what's plan B? Well, plan B was money.
Yes.
Real money, not a little bit of money, real money, because DNA analysis like this isn't cheap. So the sheriff's office and the medical examiner's office teamed up and paid for that private lab to help do what the existing system wouldn't do. Not couldn't do, wouldn't do. And that's where we bring in Bodhi Technology, a private forensic DNA lab that specializes in identifying human remains. The Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office had leaned on their expertise before, and in 2020, we needed them again.
Bodhi Technology is a trusted and respected resource to provide DNA identification to law enforcement agencies, federal and state governments, crime laboratories, and disaster management organizations around the world. Needless to say, they're very good at what they do, and we turned to them for foundational forensic DNA testing and CODIS upload. We take a rib sample from our deceased female and we sent it to Bodhi. Within weeks, we received a final laboratory report, really on May 21st, 2020 to be exact, that stated they had generated a DNA profile from the rib and uploaded it into CODIS. In 2020, Bodhi had a contract with a state-run CODIS participating laboratory, so they were helping us upload this profile when our own crime lab DNA unit wouldn't. And now, Her DNA is searching. It's searching in the system. Her DNA profile is being compared to missing persons profiles and family reference standards to see if there is any genetic associations to those cases.
The Emmy's office has gotten lots of successes uploading DNA profiles into CODIS before. We've talked about how powerful this database is and how well it works when it's populated. Well, we were definitely hoping for a resolution to this case through the traditional foundational DNA analysis and comparison. But in this case, no hits, nothing. Linn County Sheriff's Office did as much as they could investigating the case. They put out a press release, they searched in NCIC, they interviewed the witnesses who found the body, but there were no indication that we would be able to quickly identify her at this point. They just had really hit that wall.
It's true. And another thing to point out is even with Callie's amazing two-dimensional reapproximation of her facial features, no one was recognizing her because Linn County used that in all of their press releases. Do you know this woman? And no one was coming forward. So we escalate. In 2021, we sent the case and the DNA to Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon Nanolabs is the industry leader in SNP testing, bioinformational analysis, DNA phenotyping, and genetic genealogy research. They perform SNP testing and come back with an initial snapshot assessment of Linn County Cowgirl's genetic, ancestral, and physical characteristics. And suddenly, we get lots of information, way more information than we had ever had. She had an exotic mixture of Northern European and Western European ancestry, but also had West African descendants and East African descendants. The Parabon snapshot report also predicted she likely had green or hazel eyes, dark blonde to brown hair, and fair to light brown skin.
One of the great things about that snapshot report is the fact that they not only give you a prediction of physical characteristics, but they also allow you to narrow down who this person is not. Because of the high statistical accuracy of the predictions, we knew that she didn't have dark brown skin, even though she had African roots. We knew that she didn't have dark brown eyes, and when we knew that her hair was most definitely not naturally black or red, even the indication of what she didn't look like is a step forward, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense because now you're not looking for someone with those characteristics that the phenotype did not show exist in this human being. DNA phenotyping does come next in this case, which brought up all those physical characteristics on paper and to life in a two-dimensional digital composite image. Our forensic artist, Callie, shared her digital images of the skull and the mandible with Parabon's forensic artist. Their collaboration created an image that was used on her NamUs profile, in press releases, and in places that's used to the media to find out who she was. It really is amazing to see. So check it out on our website, meetmeatthemorgue.org. We've posted it there along with all of our other photos.
Now they needed to upload that SNP profile into the genetic genealogy databases they have access to try to find a familial association and perform research from there. Because Linn County Cowgirl's ancestry was unique, the genealogists weren't sure how deep they could dig into her ancestral lines or family trees. The reality is the African population throughout the world are not necessarily well represented in genealogy databases. Remember, she had both West and East African ancestors. It turns out that Parabon and the expert genealogists that were working on the case were able to find numerous familial associations through the main database they use. GEDmatch.
So genetic genealogy starts generating leads in this case. Second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, family trees, and eventually 2 family lines converge in the early 1800s through marriages that proved to be invaluable. In addition, several death notifications, newspaper articles, and public records mentioned distant members of this particular family line, all painstakingly discovered by Parabon Nanolabs genetic genealogy research specialists. And as they keep digging, one woman keeps surfacing in their research, a woman who had quietly disappeared from public life. Minimal social media, very little recent contact, no Facebook posts since 2008, which actually sounds like me.
It does, actually, very much.
Hardly any digital footprint to this one particular woman. And then the genealogist from Parabon finds a missing person flyer from Washington State, our northern neighbor on the West Coast. The person on the flyer was genetically associated with the huge family tree Parabon had built. The missing person flyer says that this individual was last contacted at the downtown post office in a town in Washington State in July of 2019. The woman on the missing person poster had medical issues, and the police department investigating her disappearance was hoping that someone had seen her so that she could get the medical help she needed. And for the first time in 3 years, she's not Linn County Cowgirl anymore. Her name just might be Grace Lorna Weaver.
Grace Weaver from Washington State was listed as a white female, 5'7" tall, 110 pounds, with brown hair and green eyes. 3 years. 3 years to possibly give her name back to her. The sheriff's office was quick to use this information. They contacted the most recent relatives of Grace Weaver they could find. Those all-important interviews were crucial in determining when Grace Weaver's family had last seen her, who she was, and how we might finalize the identification of Linn County Cowgirl with their help, right? We have to finish that loop, right?
Yes.
We think we know, but we've got to make sure.
Yes.
Several of the family members had already tested their DNA through consumer DNA testing sites like, 23andMe and Ancestry.com. So Linn County Sheriff's Office encouraged them to upload those existing profiles they received from 23andMe into the open source database GEDmatch, which we've talked about before. With Parabon genealogists' help, an oral swab from their family member was also collected and sent straight to Parabon for that kinship comparison.
And in January of 2023, 3 years later, family DNA confirms it. The oral swab standard from the family member had a 100% probability of being genetically related to our decedent. Again, after almost 3 years of investigation, in January of 2023, we could definitively say that Linn County Cowgirl had been identified as Grace Lorna Weaver. And we could finally give Grace back to her family. This case highlights something really important. There was no NamUs entry of Grace on the missing person side of the website. If we had seen Grace's picture as a missing person on that national website, seen her eye color, hair color, age, and unique facial features, would we have put 2 and 2 together? Maybe, probably. There was also no family DNA collected and uploaded into CODIS, which means the system didn't fail because it didn't work. It stalled because critical pieces were missing. And that's an important distinction, because databases don't solve cases. People do. Investigators do. Families do. Scientists do. Databases are only as powerful as what gets entered into them.
Or what gets left out.
That's true. Yes.
Right? Sound familiar? Because if you've been with us through our last few episodes, you already know. This isn't just a Grace Weaver problem. This isn't just a Linn County problem. This is an infrastructure problem. And when pieces of that infrastructure are missing, real people pay the price. And names are delayed. Work
That's
is
true.
delayed.
That's true. And no indictment or shade being thrown on that small police agency that had that missing person poster. They were doing everything in their power within their resources to try and find Grace Weaver. Just because they hadn't done those steps of the DNA and the databases doesn't mean they're not a great police agency. It's resources and it's priorities. So real people do pay the price, and these investigations are stalled because we all have to work together to resolve them. And in the end, this case did come together because of persistence, science, and collaboration. A whole lot of people refusing to let her stay unnamed. One of the cool things about this case is the fact that the phenotype composite that Parabon Nanolabs created was so incredibly accurate. The investigative genetic genealogist had found a picture of Grace Weaver from 2008. And if you go to our website, you can see that the actual picture of Grace is eerily similar to the forensic reconstruction image that was created through DNA phenotyping. What an amazing technology we have to draw on that creates an image from genetic material. Truly astounding.
So in the end, we pulled out all of the stops. The ME's office collected, analyzed, collaborated, and partnered the hell out of this case. And ultimately, it paid off. But let's remember what's most important. And that's the fact that the ending is sad, but at least we were able to give a family the answers they deserved. And we want to extend our condolences to Grace's family and thank them for trusting the process. Because even though 3 years is a long time, getting answers doesn't erase the pain. But names do matter. The truth matters. And a type of resolution matters, even though it's still sad.
Yes, absolutely. And dismembers, if you're wondering, this case is still open. The circumstances of Grace's death are still being investigated. So if you know anything at all, the Linn County Sheriff's Office wants to hear from you. Their case number is 20-01063. You can head to their website for contact information.
All right, dismembers, this one's heavy and sad, but again, it matters. And that's why we talk about him.
That's right. And you know what? It's a reminder. Every unidentified person has a name. We just have to find it. I know the professionals I worked with in our medical examiner's office had a real fondness for Grace's case as we were working hard to identify her. And we were genuinely honored to be a part of resolving this case. The girl with the bling on her jeans finally had the dignity of a name.
Maybe there's a little bit of Linn County Cowgirl in all of us. Put on your blingy jeans, tie that bandana into a square knot, and head out into the world. We'll all do it together, but maybe we should wear tracksuits. They're more comfortable for our body types.
I vote tracksuit.
Always tracksuits.
My
Nici,
bling jeans are not comfortable.
I will admit this openly. I never owned a pair of bling jeans.
Oh, you are missing out.
Yep,
Out.
I don't
bling
think
jeans
so.
with the horseshoes on the back. Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
Ooh.
Well, Nici, until next time,
Yes.
when we both show up in our embroidered tracksuits, we need a location. Where do you want to meet?
Mindy, you slip on that velour number and you meet me at the morgue.